first settler in the community was Dr. William McPherson, arriving here in 1851. He wasn't a real doctor, but got the name doctor as he sold homemade medicines. He built the first shanty on the site of what is now the cenotaph on the northwest corner of Main and Amaranth Streets. The shanty eventually became the west section of what later was the Dominion Hotel. In 1851, the site consisted of 4 farms, which is now Main and Amaranth Streets being the boundary lines. In 1854, Samuel Stuckey and John Luxton brought their young families from Toronto to this area. Stuckey owned 400 acres west of Main Street, between the second line, south to the East Garfraxa-Luther town line. He and his wife Anne, née Davy, settled on the west half of Lot 30, Concession 1, with the Luxtons being on the east half. This property is southwest of what is now Grand Valley. It was here that Sam Stuckey built his cabin. In 1859, Stuckey applied to open a post office in his cabin, and in 1860 the community's first post office was opened. Prior to that, someone had to walk down to Reading Post Office, which was east of Marsville, to receive the mail. This was an 8-mile round trip. It was also the location of the closest store. In 1854, Sam Stuckey sold the 100 acres west of Main Street and south of Amaranth Street to Mrs. George Joyce. They built a log tavern on the southwest corner of what is now Amaranth and Main Streets. This was the start of the village, which became known locally as Joyce's Corners. By 1860, the name Luther Village was used by the Postal Department. Also, by 1860, the first municipal council was formed, of which Sam Stuckey was a member. The first schoolhouse was built on the southeast corner of what is now Amaranth and Main Streets. During the 1860s, the population was slowly increasing. They still had to travel to Hillsburg or Fergus to purchase supplies, and it was impossible to make the trip in one day. By 1869, the population was 15 and there were 9 buildings. Unfortunately, none of the buildings exist today. The oldest building in Grand Valley now is on the southeast corner of Main and Mill Streets, Marie's Valley Inn Restaurant, built by Hugh Gilbreth in 1870. The first store in Grand Valley, owned by partners William Dawson and W.R. Scott, opened in 1870 and was located on the east side of Main Street, about where the drugstore is now at number 23. In 1870, Samuel Stuckey purchased Dr. McPherson's shanty and enlarged it to become the Dominion Hotel. He moved his family into it and built a 2-story building that housed a horse stable on the bottom. The top story was a good-sized hall, which was used by the community for concerts, dances, and town meetings. As it was against the law to have a post office in a hotel, it was moved to Dawson's store, with William Dawson becoming postmaster in 1870. The railway came to Grand Valley in 1871, which was a large boom to the community. The town council offered the CPR a $500 bonus if it could have a station here by 1870, and it did not happen, and the council refused to pay the bonus. For spite, the CPR did not install a station here until 1875. For the first 5 years, people in freight had to travel to the station in Waldemer. These men are standing on a jigger. This picture was taken around 1875, showing the first train station, which was built on the north side of the tracks to the southwest of Grand Valley. A construction crew working for the Grey Bruce Railway. Each crew had 2 men, one to handle the horses and the second man to operate the scraper. This picture also shows the first station in Grand Valley on the north side of the tracks, which was used from 1875 until 1903. The white sign on the front of the station says Telegraph Office. The new station on the south side of the tracks, built in 1903. Passengers in front of the Grand Valley Station circa 1909. 2 east and westbound passenger trains and at least 2 large freight trains pass through here daily. Train leaving the station heading west in 1954. Railway station in 1956. In 1957, the last passenger train passed through. After that, a passenger car was attached to the freight train. On August 1st, 1984, the last freight train passed through. thus ending an era of train service for Grand Valley. In 1971, the local Legion branch purchased the CP station and had it moved west just off the CP property. For a few years it was used as the Legion Meeting Hall. Today the station house is a private home, located not far from where it stood since 1903. William Buchanan served as the Grand Valley staging agent from 1886 until his retirement in 1933. In 1998, the municipality purchased the rail line and station property from the CPR for the sum of $8,000. In 2001, a group of interested people approached the local council requesting that they enter into an agreement to make the former railway line a public trail. Today, the Upper Grand Trailway manages and maintains the trailway.
The old wooden bridge on the east end of Amaranth Street was built in 1883. This picture was taken looking west in 1899. This bridge was destroyed by ice and flooding in 1918 and was replaced by a concrete structure. This is the wooden Main Street Bridge that was built in 1901 to replace the older bridge that was swept away by flooding. This bridge was knocked off its foundation in 1918, but was not broken up and was put back in place. This shows the wooden Main Street Bridge being hit by ice in 1934. It was destroyed and went downriver. The Main Street Bridge that was built in 1934 was torn down and replaced with a new bridge in 1994. Construction of the concrete bridge on Amaranth Street in 1918, the first bridge of this type built in Ontario. Amaranth Street Bridge under construction in 1918, showing the temporary bridge being used. The single-lane Amaranth Bridge completed in 1918. The Amaranth Bridge under demolition in the late summer of 2001. The new Amaranth Street Bridge under construction, looking west into town. The deck being constructed on the bridge. The newly completed two-lane Amaranth Street Bridge in 2002.
Luther Council, 1873-1874. Back row left to right. William Loxton, Edward Colbeck, William Smeltzer, Sam Stuckey, Treasurer. Front row left to right. Peter Hansen, William Dawson, Grand Valley's first storekeeper. Neil MacArthur, first school teacher. Lewis Maneri Sr., Reeve of Grand Valley, 1910 and 1917. In 1945, he became the Conservative MP for the riding of Wellington North. He served one 4-year term. Grand Valley Council, 1961. Left to right, Scotty McIntyre Clerk, W.J. Baker, Mrs. Bill Boggs, Ted Eastham Reeve, Lewis Maneri Jr., Bruce Fife, Charles Benham Constable. Grand Valley Council, 1966. Left to right, Tony West, Stan McPherson, Bill Baker, Bruce Fife Reeve, Scotty McIntyre Clerk, and Jim Hillis. Grand Valley Council, 1977. Back row left to right, Arnold Townsend, School Trustee, Bruce Fife, Jack Sim, John Wanless, Tom Tyndall. Front row left to right, Les Canavet Clerk, Bill Young Reeve, Willa Benham. Grand Valley Council, 1986. Back row left to right, Bruce Fife, Jim Irvin, Steve White, Brian Hillis. Front row left to right, Les Canavet Clerk, Bill Young Reeve, Jane Wilson Assistant Clerk. East Luther Grand Valley Council, 2010. Standing left to right, Elizabeth Taylor, Steve Solomon Deputy Mayor, Jane Wilson CAO Clerk Treasurer, Rick Taylor, Myrna Roberts. Seated, John Oosterhoff, Mayor.
In the bottom left corner is a picture of Grand Valley's first school, built in 1860 on the southeast corner of Main and Amaranth Streets. The first building in the community not made of logs. It was used as a school until 1875. This building burned in 1914. At the right is the second school, built in 1875 and enlarged in 1888. It was removed in the 1930s. On the left is the third school, built in 1892. The two-story school had 2 rooms on the ground floor and 2 above. The rear 2 rooms were added in 1912. This school was used until it closed in 1983. Class picture, Grand Valley Public School in 1938. The new high school built in 1959. In 1960, the gymnasium was added. This served as a high school until 1969, when it became a public school and the high school students were bused to Orangeville. Public School, 2008. Grand Valley Public School teachers dressed for Canada's centennial celebration in 1967, left to right: Bob Sargent, Essie Kennedy, June Maycock, Ralph Woods, the principal, Isabel Clark, Marion Howes, and Isabel Lawson.
Here is a letter signed by Grand Valley businessmen requesting that Art Taylor, although not of age, be given an exemption to drive the car as his father was ill and Art needed the car to carry out his father's business. Early on, the town would appoint a fire chief, and every able-bodied man was expected to respond when the church bell sounded, indicating that there was a fire. In 1952, the local Lions Club requested an organized fire brigade be formed. The town purchased a used pumper truck from the city of Toronto. Here are some members standing on the newly acquired fire truck. In 1954, the council purchased helmets, coats, and other equipment for the fire department, and in 1955, built this new 3-bay fire hall on Mill Street. Left is Grand Valley Reeve Joe Greenwood and a representative from the Ontario Fire Marshal's office cutting the ribbon at the official opening of the fire hall in 1955. At the opening, left to right, Chief Scotty McIntyre, Bud Lansborough in the black helmet, and Bill Boggs in the red helmet. Here are members of the Grand Valley Fire Department at Stuckey's Restaurant in 1965. Members of the fire department in the early 1980s. When the fire hall in Mill Street became too small for today's modern equipment, this new fire hall was built in 1997 on the south end of town. The old hall in Mill Street was torn down. The County of Dufferin purchased a piece of property just north of the Municipal Works Garage on Main Street North and built an ambulance station in 2006. This station ensures prompt medical aid to the residents of the community.
This was the first time a snowblower had been seen working in Grand Valley. Garbage was collected this way in Grand Valley around 1957 with a team of horses and a wagon. This is Ernie Gordon, who worked for Joe Ritchie. Public Works Superintendent Carl Hillis picking up garbage on Main Street around 1980. This is Main Street construction installing the sanitary sewers in 1972. The Public Works Department used the old arena for an equipment storage garage from the mid-1970s until 1982, when it was torn down for a new works garage. The new Public Works garage on Main Street built in 1983. The erection of the water tower for the new municipal water system, which came online and began servicing residents in October 1994. Here's the completed water tower at the north end of town. The wastewater treatment plant on Emma Street, built in 1972. This communal wastewater treatment plant eliminated the need for individual residents to have their own septic system.
Built in 1883, this was the first building that was located on the library corner. It was demolished in 1912 to make room for the new Carnegie Library, built in 1913. This is Mr. James McKinley, the first Grand Valley librarian from 1907 to 1915. The Carnegie Library about 1920. The Carnegie Library around 1980. The library was in the upper floor, and below, on the Amaranth Street level, was Carnegie Hall, which was used for community meetings and social functions. The building was destroyed by the 1985 tornado. The opening of the new library in 1988. On the left are Jim Mervyn and Brian Hillis, counselors. The three children left to right, Richard Moore, Catherine Moore, and Wilfred McLean. These children had been trapped in the rubble when the tornado hit the library. Behind them is Shan Layton, librarian, who had also been trapped in the rubble. The new library municipal office as it looks today. The present librarian, Shan Layton, has been the librarian for the last 30 years. In 1890, there were two telephones in Grand Valley, one in W.R. Scott's store and the other in the office of R.E. Hamilton. By 1900, there were 10 phones, and in 1912, 43. These were all business phones. The young ladies that operated the first switchboard that was located in Dr. Campbell's drugstore. The lady on the left is Lillian II, Mrs. Norman Riley. In 1934, John Watt purchased the East Luther telephone system, assisted by his son-in-law, Ivan Bruce. The switchboard was moved into their house on Main Street, the right side of this picture. In 1959, both John Watt and Ivan Bruce passed away, and Ivan's wife Gladys assumed management. This is a telephone switchboard in the Bruce home in 1959. Switchboard operators left to right, Isabel Francis, Ada Hillis, and Gladys Bruce in 1957. Here is Ada Hillis in 1961. When Ivan Bruce and John Watt both passed away in 1959, Gladys hired Bill Berry to work as her lineman. Here's Bill Berry with his wife Isabel. Mrs. Bruce sold the system to Bell Canada in 1961, and the first non-operator assistance dial call was made in Grand Valley on December 6, 1964. Dr. Alfred Skippon, family doctor in Grand Valley from 1895 to 1899. Dr. George Campbell took over his practice in 1899. Dr. G.I. Campbell and his two daughters. He practiced from 1899 to 1923. Dr. M.W. Berwick, Grand Valley physician from 1906 to 1962. Dr. Don Muller, Grand Valley physician from 1973 to 1994, when he left Grand Valley. Dr. Dan Mallon took over Dr. Muller's practice in 1994 and is still there to this present day. Grand Valley dentist Dr. Boner Bracken and his wife Viola. Dr. Bracken practiced in Grand Valley from 1918 to 1922, and again from 1936 till his death in 1957. Official opening of the Medical Center on Main Street in 1973. Left to right, Wilfred West, John Root, MPP, and Stan Potter. The Medical Center built in 1973 as it looks today. Dentist Robert Mitchell began his practice here in 1977 and is still practicing today. This picture taken around 1920, left, local barber Sam Gamble, and right, Harry Donaghy, prepared to pull the tooth of an unfortunate patient. The patient and the man holding his head are not known.
The first fall fair held in Grand Valley was October the 25th, 1870. For the first 16 years, the one-day fair was held on the open property east of Crozier Street and north of Amaranth Street, known as the Commons. In 1886, the present fair site at the north end of the village was purchased. Until the first agricultural hall was built in 1909, exhibits were shown on both floors of the horse shed belonging to the Dominion Hotel on the northwest corner of Amaranth and Main Streets. Here's horse racing at the fairgrounds. Horse racing at the fairgrounds showing the grandstand and judges' stand around 1918. On the right side is the west end of the original arena. Judging roadster horses at the fair. Public school classes parading in front of the grandstand around 1950. The first arena and agricultural hall being built in 1909 by Robert Dixon at the top of Main Street Hill on the west side of the road. It served as the community arena and hall until 1967, when the present arena was built. The front of the old arena during the winter of 1947. The front of the old arena in 1962. The old arena under demolition in 1982 to make room for the construction of the new Municipal Public Works Garage. The new arena under construction during the spring of 1967. To celebrate and officially open the new arena in September 1967, world-renowned band leader Guy Lombardo was brought in by the local Lions Club. The new arena in December 1967, built with much volunteer labor and materials, cost $175,000 to construct. Hockey and skating began in the spring of 1968. The front of the arena has undergone some alterations since 1967. This is how it appears today in 2011.
Construction of the Senior Citizen Apartment building on Emma Street in 1979. This lot had formerly been the site of the Grand Valley Lawn Bowling Greens. The Presbyterian Church can be seen in the background. Official opening of the Senior Citizen Apartment buildings in 1979. The apartment building at 71 Emma Street as it appears today.
St. Albans Anglican Church, around 1919. Built in 1880 on land donated by Samuel Stuckey, it was destroyed in the 1985 tornado. The Anglican Church Choir, 1920. Lectern hand-carved by W. Stuckey, son of Samuel Stuckey. This lectern was salvaged from the ruins of St. Albans Anglican Church after the tornado of 1985. This is the church after the tornado. The newly built St. Albans Church. Knox Presbyterian Church on Water Street, around 1905. It was built in 1901. Presbyterian Church Sunday School class of 1895. Presbyterian Sunday School class of 1900. Presbyterian Young People's Society of 1920. The man in black tie facing the camera is Reverend Samuel Lundy, who was minister from 1919 to 1925. Presbyterian Church Choir around 1925. Grand Valley Methodist Church, now the United Church, around 1907. The church was built in 1896 and was destroyed by the 1985 tornado. The United Church Horse Shed, built in 1911 and torn down in 1959. The new pipe organ installed when the church was new in 1896. An electric organ replaced it in 1912. Inside the United Church in 1897, decorated for Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. Methodist Church Choir in 1902. Inside the United Church about 1972. On the bottom left is Clarence Lawson playing the organ. He was the Presbyterian Church organist from 1922 until his death in 1973. The United Church after being struck by the tornado. The new United Church as it is today. On the right is the Grand Valley Church of Christ, built in 1892, which was also destroyed by the tornado. The Orange Hall is on the left. It too was destroyed, but was never replaced. The site became the parking lot for the church. The Church of Christ as it appeared after being hit by the tornado. The present-day Church of Christ on Amaranth Street East. The Community of Christ Church, formerly called the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, was built in 1924. It is located on Mill Street. The Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses is located on Cooper Street and was built in 1962. Fellowship Baptist Church, located on Main Street North, was built in 1987. It closed in 2010. The Grand Valley Canadian Reformed Church, located directly north of the Anglican Cemetery, was built in 1990. It was enlarged in 2010. St. Albans Cemetery, Main Street North, is located on a piece of property that was donated by church member Samuel Stuckey in 1878. The black iron fence across the front of the property was built and donated by church member and local blacksmith Owen Birkeland. Union Cemetery, located in the southeast corner of Grand Valley, started on land donated by John Tweedy in 1888. He bought and donated the land when his 17-year-old daughter, Sarah Edith, passed away. Union Cemetery mortuary, built in 1948. Having the mortuary eliminated the need to dig graves during the winter months. Bodies are kept in the basement of the building for spring interment.
Grand Valley Baseball Team, 1922. Grand Valley Men's Softball Team, 1965. Grand Valley Boys Softball Team, circa 1979. Grand Valley Lacrosse Team. Curling in the old arena, left to right, Ivan Bruce, Bill Baker, and Wally Clark. 1949, left to right, Ron Richardson, Don Richardson, Murray Taylor, and Hill Taylor at a bonspiel. Bill Young left and Pete Bowis right at the Dufferin County Centennial Bonspiel in 1981. The Grand Valley Swimming Hole on the east end of Mill Street. New Year's Day Polar Dip in the Grand River, 2000. 1909, the Grand Valley Lawn Bowling Green, located southwest of the Presbyterian Church, where the Senior Citizen Apartment Building is now located. Grand Valley Lawn Bowlers in 1915 with their trophies. Back row left to right, Alf Maneri, W.G. Jenkins, William McClellan, Logan Craig, and James J. Reith. Front row left to right, Ed McIntyre and Archie Ramsey, with Archie Ramsey here winning the single men's Canadian Championship. Grand Valley Lawn Bowling Green in 1915. Lawn Bowling Green looking east, the Presbyterian Church is on the left. Grand Valley Hockey Team 1907. Grand Valley Hockey Team about 1952. Grand Valley Midget Hockey Team 1969. Grand Valley Men's Hockey Team 1970. Grand Valley Novice Hockey Team 1978. Grand Valley Harvesters 1985 Ontario Junior D Champions. 2006 Bantam OMHA Champions. 2007 Bantam OMHA Champions. 2008 again the Bantam Champions. 2008 Midget OMHA Champions. 2009 Pee Wee OMHA Champions. 2011 Bantam OMHA Champions. Grand Valley Skating Club Precision Team. After the Lions Club was formed in 1951, one of the first projects was to build a baseball diamond across the river in Brooklyn. With Greenwood Construction supplying the heavy equipment, the park was built in 1954. The lights were installed in 1961. Grand Valley Ballpark as it looks today from center field. Here's the Grand Valley Brass Band, 1890s. Grand Valley Dramatic Club, 1907. Grand Valley Dramatic Club, 1916. Grand Valley Boy Scouts, 1918. Grand Valley Women's Institute, 1915. This group disbanded in 1941. Grand Valley Masons, 1988. Left to right, Ozzie Foreman, Gordon Winters, Les Solomon. Grand Valley Historic Society presents a donation to the Friends of South Luther School in 2009. This group was formed in November 2004. Left to right, Rick Taylor, Veda McCrone, Linda Paquette, Pearl Newson, Marion Taylor, Ann McPherson, Glenna Hunt, Greg Meadows, and Kathy Mullis. Horticultural Society members left to right, Lois Atkinson, Peg Sunnigs, and Ivadale Black. Following the 1985 tornado, the Horticultural Society received the grant to replant the cenotaph property. From left, Cam Stewart, Perrin Beatty, MP, Pat Kalapaka, Reeve of Grand Valley, Lauren Fuller, Peg Sunnigs, President of the Horticultural Society, Marjorie Durnford, and Chuck Sturrock of the Ontario Horticultural Society. Horticultural Society members, Margaret Hunter, Luella Montgomery, Julie Balmusberger, and Edith Riley. In 1980, Roy and Mabel Graham were recognized by the Horticultural Society for their dedicated service to the community. On June 13, 1951, the Grand Valley Lions Club held their gala charter night in the old arena with over 300 in attendance. The first president of the Lions Club was Scotty McIntyre, and the first secretary was Bud Lansborough. In 1976, the Lions Club arranged for the old pavilion used at the lawn bowling greens to be moved to the ballpark to be used as a snack bar. Left to right, Jim Young, Jim Graham, Merv McConnell, Dick Sprite, Bill Barry. The Grand Valley Air Cadets Tornado Squadron in 1992.
Soldiers returning to Grand Valley from the Boer War, December 1900. The missing buildings are results of the October 1900 fire. The Grand Valley Band playing in front of the Commercial Hotel in 1901, a special day honoring the men that had fought in the Boer War. Grand Valley 164th Battalion, May 2nd, 1916. They landed in England on April the 22nd, 1917. This picture was taken in front of the 2nd Presbyterian Church Manse, 48 Main Street North. The men in the rear, not in uniform, are Grand Valley councillors and clergymen. The Gamble home, 65 Main Street South, 1918. Mrs. Gamble, with son Bill and daughter Margaret, awaiting the return of Mrs. Gamble's brother, Private Frank Burgess, shown here from the First World War. A civic reception for the soldiers returning from World War I, 1919. The manor in the newly constructed grandstand, which was located on the west side of the fairgrounds. The organizing committee is grouped in front around the field gun. The War Memorial erected on the northwest corner of Main and Amaranth Streets in 1920 to honor the local men who lost their lives in the First World War.
A major fire in October 1900 destroyed all the buildings from number 29 to number 43 South on the east side of the street. Everything from what is now Grace Brown Insurance south to Grand Valley Insurance was lost. Another look at the hole left by the fire of 1900. On the right side is the building of John McIntyre & Sons Feed and Seed Store on the northeast corner of Main and Mill Streets. On the north end of the building was George Lawson's Shoe Store. This corner building, which is the current site of the Royal Bank, was destroyed by a large fire in 1910. When rebuilt in 1911, the bank moved into the corner site, McIntyre next to them on the north, and Lawson's Shoes north of that. This original brick home of Dr. G.I. Campbell on the northeast corner of Amaranth and Crozier Streets was completely destroyed by fire in 1913. Dr. Campbell built a new home with a waiting room and office for his practice. This home later became the office and home of Dr. Berwick. Tom Tyndall's feed mill on Emma Street in 1961. In 1963, it burnt to the ground. Tom rebuilt the mill that sits here today, owned by Kenilworth Feeds. Flooding on the Grand River has always been a concern to the residents living along its banks. Flooded basements and in some cases the main floors of the homes were common occurrences. This picture taken in 1897 is looking southeast from the lawn of the Presbyterian Church area. 1901, taken from the west side of town looking eastward up the river. Note the Main Street Bridge has been taken away by the flood. Looking southwest from the Presbyterian Church lawn, showing the ice jam on Water Street around 1903. Taken from Main Street Bridge looking southwest. Looking north up Water Street, taken from approximately from the front of the McCrone House, 122 Water Street. This picture taken from the same location as the last picture, looking northwards in 1918. This flood was one of the worst recorded, destroying both the Amaranth Street and Main Street bridges. The black object in the center of the photo appears to be a piece of one of the bridges. Looking east up the river from the west side of town in 1918, the Main Street Bridge is gone. Another picture of the 1918 flood with Knox Presbyterian Church in the background. Picture taken from the lawn of Presbyterian Church looking southeast, showing the Main Street Bridge. On the bridge is an advertisement for Marshall Simpson, partners in the undertaking business in Grand Valley from 1892 to 1900. The 1930 spring flood looking west from the Main Street Bridge. At the right is the clubhouse at the lawn bowling greens. 1934, the Main Street Bridge being swept down the river. A concrete bridge was built later in the year to replace it. Looking south down Water Street, 1937. Early 1960s, water on the road. The building at the left and the rear is Shannon's Feed Mill. Crowds of people on the Main Street Bridge watching the ice in 1966. Ice left on Water Street following the flooding early 1970s, looking north from 122 Water Street. Standing on Main Street Bridge looking west towards Sid Vanderwerf's garage.
The winter of 1947 saw an exceptionally large amount of snow. Here the train is stuck east of Grand Valley. The CPR hired local men with shovels to help free the train from the snowbanks. looking west out of Grand Valley on Amaranth Street in March 1959. The snowplow trying to open the road at the railway tracks south of Grand Valley. The plow is heading southward. Looking south down the west side of Main Street in 1947, in front of H.H. Hilburn's Chevrolet dealership, the top of the gas pump is sticking out above the snow.
On the last day of May 1985, a devastating tornado struck Grand Valley, traveling down the entire length of Amaranth Street. This is the north side of Amaranth Street, looking east at the houses that were east of the Church of Christ, looking north on Crozier Street from Amaranth Street. Standing on the site of Corm Hustler's house at 24 Leeson Street North, looking southeast. The white house on the left belonged to Rick Taylor at 58 Amaranth Street West, and the brick house belonged to Ruth Hunter of 64 Amaranth Street West. Standing north of the library on Main Street, looking east, showing the houses on Amaranth Street. Looking west up Amaranth Street East, the morning following the tornado. Located in front of the Grand Valley Library, this plaque was donated by the East Luther Grand Valley Historic Society to the community in 2010, commemorating the 25th anniversary of the tornado. Shannon Layton left, who was a librarian in 1985, and Les Canavet, Grand Valley clerk in 1985, unveiled the historic plaque. From left to right, Rick Taylor, who was a public works employee in 1985. Shannon Layton was librarian and still is librarian today. Les Canavet was the clerk of Grand Valley. Jim Irvin was a counselor in 1985, and Irvin Moore, who was the fire chief in 1985. In 1961, Grand Valley celebrated its 100-year anniversary on the August holiday weekend. This picture shows the parade and huge crowds of people that attended. The man in the car with the white hat is John Talbot. Many people wore period clothing. Here is Dreen Lansborough and Bill Sim. These are the contestants that entered the beer growing contest, left to right. Albert Bridge, Reg Corbett, Les Sullivan, Carl Hillis, who won the contest, Emerson Rogers, Roy Stuckey, and Titch Boswell. A collection of local antiques were on display in Carnegie Hall, which was located on the lower floor of the Carnegie Library. This building was destroyed by the tornado of 1985. Left to right, Clarence Lawson, owner of the shoe store, watches Barbara Morris Campbell trim Roy Stuckey's beard. The 1961 Centennial Committee. These people were in charge of planning the events for the 4-day celebration.
In August of 2004, some scenes for a feature-length movie set in the 1950s, The Prize Winner of Defiance, Ohio, starring Julianne Moore and Woody Harrelson, were shot on the main street of Grand Valley. This is looking north up Main Street, showing the period-appropriate cars and the American flags. Lights and cameras set up in front of Merritt's Food Market, preparing for a shot. Actor Woody Harrelson in shirt and tie between scenes. The front of Merritt's Food Market decorated to look like a food market from the 1950s. Here's the interior set up as the 1950s fruit and vegetable display.
Alf Maneri, Reeve of Grand Valley and County Warden in 1918. He was also Clerk-Treasurer of Grand Valley from 1930 to 1958. Robert Lang, Grand Valley businessman, Reeve of Grand Valley and Warden of Dufferin County in 1929. Erwin Henderson worked as the Red Cross swimming instructor and lifeguard when the river was used as a local swimming pool in the early 1960s. In 1981, Bruce Fife left, presents an award to Lil and Tom Tyndall for their long-serving contribution to the community. The Taylor twins, on their 90th birthday in 1982, daughters of Jacob and Melissa Taylor. On the left is Amelia, Mrs. Gordon Richardson, and on the right is Laura, Mrs. Robert Farthing. Minnie Drury, on her 100th birthday in 1987, she received a personal phone call from Queen Elizabeth on this day. She died in 1992 at the age of 105. Scotty McIntyre, Grand Valley Raven Warden, 1944. Scotty was the first Lions Club president in 1951 and the first fire chief of the newly formed Grand Valley Fire Department from 1955. Scotty was very heavily active in community service. Joel Ritchie in 1947. Joel began carrying the rural mail on Rural Route No. 1 Grand Valley when he was 14 years old in 1919. He continued with this mail contract until his death in 1980, a total of 61 years. He has the distinction of being the longest serving mail carrier in Canadian history. Here he is with a service medal and his wife May. Les Canavet was Grand Valley's first full-time clerk beginning in 1973, working out of an office constructed inside the door at Carnegie Hall below the library. Previous to that, the clerks such as Alf Maneri, Scotty McIntyre, and Reg Corbett worked from their homes. Les retired in 1986.
Robert Elmer Lougheed, sitting here among his works, went to school in Grand Valley and by the age of 20 began work at the arts department of the Toronto Star Weekly. He moved to the United States in 1939 and became an accomplished and well-known artist. Here's the piece he did for the Reader's Digest in 1961. This picture from approximately 1950 is thought to be the horses of Grand Valley's Joe Ritchie. Lougheed grew up on this farm as a boy and came back to visit periodically.
The west side of Main Street looking south from Amaranth Street corner in 1901. Main Street looking south from Amaranth Street about 1909. Another scene looking south from Amaranth about 1916. Main Street was paved in 1928. Here is Main Street approximately 1948. Main Street, July 1958, looking south from Amaranth Street. Again the same view looking south from Amaranth Street in 2011. Main Street looking north from Mill Street about 1896. Again looking north up Main Street approximately 1908. Another view looking up Main Street approximately 1909. Looking north up Main Street from Mill Street approximately 1914. Once again looking north on Main Street from Mill approximately 1918. Looking north up Main Street from Mill Street around 1930. Main Street from Mill Street 1940. Here again looking north up Main Street from Mill Street around 1953. Looking north up Main Street from Mill Street around 1955. Here's Main Street from Mill Street as it appears today. The north side of Mill Street looking east from Main Street in 1895. The north side of Mill Street looking east from Main Street in 1954. The north side of Mill Street looking east as it appears today. The Dominion Hotel, located on the northwest corner of Main and Amaranth Streets, built in 1870 by Sam Stuckey. It was torn down in 1920, and the present-day war memorial was erected on the site. A closer look at the front of the Dominion Hotel around 1900. This was the horse shed for the Dominion Hotel, built in 1870 by Sam Stuckey. It was later used for many purposes. It was destroyed by the 1985 tornado. At that time, it was being used by Casey Oriakers as an auto body repair shop. This brick building was located on the south side of Amaranth Street, just west of what is now the Chop House. It was built in 1885 as a larger stable for the Dominion Hotel. The Co-op purchased it from Robert Miller in 1949, and it was their store until the mid-60s when they moved to Mill Street. It was torn down in the mid-1970s. Bill Baker, owner of Baker's Mill, located on the southeast corner of Mill and Emmons Streets from 1910 to 1954. He sold the mill in 1954 to the Co-op. The Co-op Mill as it appeared in 1960. Built by Marshall Brothers in 1878, then sold to Alec Richardson in 1883, then sold to James Baker and Son, Bill, in 1910. It was purchased by the Co-op in 1954. Grand Valley Co-op showing the store, buildings, and silo in 1962. When the older section of the Co-op Mill was being demolished in 1985, a grist mill was found under the northwest corner. Here from left to right are Les Solomon, Barry Fuller, and Ralph Brisley. The old Co-op store on Mill Street as it looks today, presently being used as a youth center. Sam Greenwood Sr. started his construction company in the early 1920s. His sons Derwin and Joe took over the business when Sam passed away in 1939. Today, Sam's grandson, also named Sam, carries on the business located just west of Orangeville. Derwin Greenwood left and Luminary Jr. on the right. Greenwood Construction Work Crews, 1929. The work truck of local painter and decorator Robert Myers. Robert Myers and his wife Margaret around 1997. Davison Bus Lines Limited. Bottom left, Jack Davison. Bottom right, Roy Davison. Behind Jack is his son Ray. Behind Roy, his son Jim. Roy and Jack began in the hay and straw business in 1956. In 1964, they bought their first school bus. In 1988, when they ran out of room at their garage on Emmons Street, they built their present garage on the Amaranth East Luther Town line. Today, they have a fleet of 23 buses. Roy passed away in 2007.
The Grand Valley Tribune from 1897. This newspaper was published for approximately 2 years. The Grand Valley Star from 1899. The Star began in 1886 and lasted until 1900, when Logan Craig began a paper called the Star and Vidette, shown here from 1904. The 1926 Star and Vidette under the new ownership of James L. Lansborough. Here is a 1959 Star and Vidette edition. At right, James L. Lansborough bought the Star and Vidette in 1925. Left, his son James G. Bud Lansborough took over as editor when the elder Mr. Lansborough passed away in 1951. Bud Lansborough was the second generation to publish the Star and Vidette paper. Third generation, Glendon Lansborough, worked at the newspaper. Bud sold the Star and Vidette in 1987, but carried on with the printing end of the business until his death in 1995. At left is the Star and Vidette printing office in 1961. Today, Glendon Lansborough carries on with the printing business in the same location where his grandfather published the Star and Vidette newspaper. This is the oldest family business existing in Grand Valley today, still going after 86 years.
Howard Hilburn had this garage built in 1928. He signed a contract with General Motors on August 29, 1915, making him the owner of the first Canadian dealership in Canada. Mr. Hilburn was born in East Luther in 1881, was clerk of East Luther for 22 years, sat on East Luther Council, became reeve, and was the county warden in 1919. This horse and cutter, circa 1905, is standing on the northwest corner of Mill and Main Streets, what would eventually be the site of Mr. Hilburn's garage. Today's Silverdale Motors Auto Repair Garage, owned by Earl and Susan Butler, occupies this corner. On the left in 1961 is the showroom of Howard Hilburn Chevrolet dealership, and on the right is the Auto Repair Garage of Clifford Gillespie. Today both of these buildings are owned by Earl and Susan Butler. The commercial hotel was built in 1875. The black door on the bottom left was used as the post office from 1941 to 1958, with Herb McDougall as postmaster. Today the old hotel is used as apartments with a hairdressing shop located on the bottom right side. The Chatfield Block, when built in 1884. The upstairs of this building was used as the town's meeting place until Carnegie Hall was built below the library in 1913. It was also used for dances and social gatherings. In 1961, shown here, the left side is Roy and Marilyn Stuckey's Tot Shop, and the right side is Hector Urban's Plumbing and Heating. Today these two stores have been combined, and the last business to operate here was Robbie's Tavern. This business did not last long, and today the building sits vacant. This building was erected in 1884. On the left is Reith's Hardware and Menswear. In 1961, the owner was John I. Reith, grandson of Jim Reith, who had owned this building in the 1890s. When old Jim Reith died in 1905, his son James J. took over the business. His brother John J. had a store across the street. About 1963, John I. sold out to Irvin Moore, and Reith moved across the street to the former Gatehouse building. John I. Reith, better known as Jack. James J. Reith was the Reeve of Grand Valley in 1913 when the Carnegie Library was built and the first arena was built in 1909. Today the old Reith building is owned by Barry Fuller and is used as a Sears outlet and general store. At left in 1961 was Lewis Minery's feed and seed store. He was also in the hay and straw business. At right was the grocery store of John Talbot. This is the first liquor outlet in Grand Valley, a trailer that was located on the outskirts of town south of where the fire hall is now located. Today Max Milk occupies the old Minery feed store, and the LCBO is located where John Talbot's grocery store was. The left side of this building was originally the Swain Hotel when it was built in 1893. The right side is the Grand Valley Creamery. Today the old Swain Hotel is the location of a laundromat and the OPP satellite office. The creamery was torn down and the lot on which it sat remains vacant. In 1961, this building was a cold storage facility. When built in 1884, it was a large general store. The owner of the general store in 1900 was this man, John W. Shields. In the mid-1970s, this building was demolished and a new building is under construction. When completed, it was opened as the Grand Valley Home Hardware. Grand Valley Home Hardware as it looks today. The Richardson Bank block built in 1888. This picture was taken in 1961. Today this building is used as apartments. On the southwest corner of Main and Amaranth Street in 1961, this was the location of the Grand Valley Co-op. Today this corner is the site of the Grand River Chop House Bar and Grill. In 1961, this garage was owned by Wally Clark. Clark had been a mechanic for T.H. Hamilton, who opened the garage in 1915. Hamilton had the Ford Car Agency here and also the first gas pumps in town. Here's T.H. Hamilton, Reeve of Grand Valley in 1907. Today, Bob Hines Food Store sits on this site. On the left in 1961 is the building of the Star and Vidette newspaper office, and on the right is Grundy's 5 to $1 store. Today on the left is Lansboro's Printing, and on the right is Brewed Awakening's coffee and tea house in the old Grundy store. At left in 1961 is Charles Hodson's Tinsmith and Plumbing store, and in the middle of the picture is McGowan and Medill Hardware store. Joe McGowan had purchased the store from Harry Donaghy, who had been at this location since 1923. Today, Hodson's Plumbing is Curls and Cuts Hairdressing, and Joe McGowan's Hardware is Heinz Dollar Store. In 1961, this was Claiborne Montgomery's grocery store. Although not the same building, on this site was the first store in Grand Valley, which opened in 1870, owned by partners William Dawson and W.R. Scott. Today it's the Grand Valley Guardian Drug Store. Built in 1892 as the R.E. Hamilton block, on the left in 1961 is Stuckey's Restaurant, opened by Wib and Millie Stuckey. On the right is Bill Jokes' Pool Room. Today, Sally Franco Real Estate is on the left and Frank Wilson Electric is on the right. In 1961, on the left is Crane's Bakery, owned by Laverne and Ivydale Crane, and on the right is Ed Windus's grocery store. Today, Grace Brown Insurance is on the left, and a stained glass business occupies the former Windus store on the right. This is Boggs Pharmacy in 1961. Today, the building is the home of Olympic Pizza. The three stores in this picture from 1961 are left Helen Shannon's Giftware, Morris Campbell's Barbershop in the middle, and on the right, Gatehouse Poultry Buyers. Today, the store on the left is vacant, the unit in the middle is rented to a signed business, and on the right is Grand Valley Insurance. The McIntyre block was built in 1910 after a fire destroyed the buildings on this corner. On the left is Lawson's Shoe Store, where Mr. Lawson sold shoes for over 80 years at 39 Main Street South. This is Clarence Lawson. His father George began selling shoes in Grand Valley at this location in 1892. Clarence took over the business when his father died in 1923. Today the building is vacant. John McIntyre, shown here, began McIntyre & Sons Feed and Seed Store in 1881. He rebuilt the brick building shown here after the fire in 1910 destroyed the original. When John died in 1923, his son Ed took over the business. Eventually, Ed's son Alan, known to everyone as Scotty, took over. Scotty sold the business to Bob Fife in 1960. On the corner of Mill and Main Streets is the Royal Bank, at this location since 1910. In 1976, the bank expanded northward into the building next door, which at that time was O&W Shoes, owned by Orman Willa Benham. It was formerly McIntyre's Feed Store. This was Steve Boswell's garage on Mill Street, later owned by Frank Steele. It was the former site of Stuart Tate's blacksmith shop. The garage was eventually torn down and is now used as a parking area across the street from the post office. The Grand Valley Post Office was built in 1958 at 9 Mill Street. Previous to that, it was located in the Commercial Hotel. In 1961, this restaurant on the southeast corner of Main and Mill Streets was owned by Irvin and Veda McCrone. Today, the restaurant is owned by Marie Jordan. This building is the oldest in Grand Valley, being built in 1870. In 1961, this garage beside the Main Street Bridge was owned by Wilfred Chirnside. It had been built by Jim Hillis in 1947. Today, the building is used as apartment units. On the southwest corner of Mill and Main Streets is Sims Funeral Home. In 1940, Tom Sim purchased the business from Frank Sargent. Bill Sims, shown here, entered into the business in 1947 with his father. In 1956, the current funeral home was added onto the south side of the furniture store. Tom Sim passed away in 1957. Bill's son Jack came into the business and worked with his father. Bill passed away in 2002, and Jack carried on until 2006 when he sold the business to Jacqueline Haluka. The business retains the Sim name to this day. River Hill subdivision built in 1972. This subdivision contains 72 homes. This view is looking east up Sprite Avenue, the original laneway to the farm. Melody Home subdivision built in 1988. It contains 59 homes and was built on land that belonged to Kyle Dutton. Leeson Street was a dead end, but this development extended Leeson Street and Melody Lane connects it to County Road 25 at the south end. This was one of the first homes in Grand Valley. The Richard Ponsford log cabin no longer exists, but was located south of Amaranth Street and east of Ponsford Street. The house was built on 3.5 acres of land in 1868 and faced south overlooking the river. The home of W.H. Simpson, 63 Amaranth Street East, around 1920. It survived the tornado of 1985. The home of J.K. Hamilton was located on the northwest corner of Amaranth and Bilby Streets. Mr. Hamilton was the local veterinarian from 1891 to 1922. This home was destroyed by the 1985 tornado. Number 22 Crozier Street around 1905. Local pharmacist Bill Boggs and his family lived in this house for several years. Looking west up Amaranth Street during the winter of 1904. Maud, the Darius delivery horse in front of the United Church Manse in King Street, about 1954. John Phillips Sawmill, circa 1915. This later became the Handle Factory in 1925. This picture is looking north, and part of this building is now part of Titch and Rita Boswell's home on River Street. The building at the left with smokestack contained the electricity plant that supplied the first electricity to Grand Valley. In 1896, the streetlights on Main Street corners were lit by electricity, as was Reese Store. The first long-distance power transmission line in Ontario was a line from Grand Valley to Arthur, completed in 1897. Looking northward from the south entryway in the Grand Valley, about 1910. Gear Street, looking east down the street from Crozier Street corner, about 1919. Gear Street, looking east from Crozier Street, 2011. Looking west up Amaranth Street from Bilby Street, about 1912. Here's the same corner around 1961. Looking east down Amaranth Street from Main Street corner, about 1912. Here's the same view looking east during the winter of 1950. Looking east from the westerly town boundary on Amaranth Street, about 1910. All the homes on the left-hand side of the picture were destroyed by the 1985 tornado. The same view looking east on Amaranth Street as it looks today, 2011. This home at 74 Water Street, currently owned by John and Sue Ince, was built in 1902 for John G. Reith. It was the first home in Grand Valley to have indoor completed bathroom. It was not until the 1920s that indoor plumbing and central heating became the normal practice for new homes. Mary Stuckey Clayton was the daughter of one of the first settlers and the first postmaster, Sam Stuckey. She provided the history of the very early days of the community. Born here in 1859, she died in 1929. Stan Hunt, born in East Luther in 1895, kept a daily journal from 1911 until his death in 1980. With an interest in local history from an early age and an inquisitive nature, Stan recorded the dates and events of the community by interviewing the town's oldest citizens, who provided him with the information about life in the community from the early days of settlement.